Welcome back, Focus Learners. Let's jump right into today's explainer, because we are tackling a massive headache for developers. So, if you've been using Google Anti-Gravity to power your development workflows, you already know it's an incredibly powerful tool, right? But you've also probably noticed a glaring inefficiency, one that's quietly draining your wallet and making your API bills look, quite frankly, like a monthly car payment. Well, today, we're actually going to solve that. We are looking at a brilliantly engineered tool called Graphify. And what it does is completely re-engineer how your AI agents understand your projects. It makes them drastically smarter and, crucially, far more token efficient. Okay, let's just start with the elephant in the room here. You give your anti-gravity agent a task, but think about what actually happens next. Before it writes a single line of useful code, it just starts reading. It's reading your README, your config files, your raw source code, one by one by one. It is essentially stumbling around in the dark, blindly trying to figure out what your project even is. It has absolutely no memory and no map. And you know what the worst part is? Tomorrow, when you spawn a brand new agent for a new task, it's going to start that exact same loop all over again. This stumbling through raw file reads is the wasted token spend that nobody is talking about. And look, you aren't the only one frustrated by this. Think about what's become known in the space as the Andrej Karpathy folder problem. Andrej Karpathy, the former head of AI at Tesla and OpenAI co-founder, described this exact workflow issue. He talked about keeping a folder on his machine where he just dumps research papers, tweets, and random notes. But when an AI has to scan that massive, unorganized pile of raw files from scratch every single time you ask it a question, it costs tokens. I mean, a lot of tokens. Your agent is literally burning through its precious, limited context window just trying to comprehend its environment. And that leaves very little room for it to actually do the work you asked it to do. So, let's visualize the actual solution here. Think of a standard anti-gravity agent as a freelancer you just hired off the street. Sure, they definitely know how to code, but they know absolutely nothing about the quirks of your specific project. Graphify, on the other hand, is like the seasoned senior engineer who walks right up to that new freelancer and hands them a complete, detailed wiring diagram before they even touch a keyboard. That senior engineer already knows exactly where the authentication lives, which microservices call which, and what the absolute heart of the system is. Graphify builds that literal diagram once, and then every single agent you spawn gets to use it for free. So what exactly is Graphify under the hood? Well, it's a tool that reads your entire project just one time, and it builds a unified knowledge graph showing how absolutely everything connects. And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. It is not just for code. Let's say your project folder contains complex research papers, PDF design docs, meeting recordings, screenshots, or even random YouTube tutorial links. Graphify handles all of it, the whole shebang. It maps your messy, mixed content project into one single, cohesive graph that your agent can easily navigate. Let's actually pull back the curtain and see how this builds, because this is exactly where the big cost decisions live. Graphify runs in 3 very distinct passes. Pass 1 parses your code, and it supports around 23 different languages using Treesitter. Now, this is fully local and costs literally 0 tokens. Pass 2 handles your audio and video using Faster Whisper, which is great for transcribing things like team meeting recordings right there locally. Again, 0 API tokens, nothing ever leaves your machine. Pass 3 is actually the only step that costs any money. It sends your markdown, PDFs, and images to your model provider to extract the core concepts. But remember, it only does this once per project. The engineering behind this is just fascinating. Graphify uses a pure graph structure. What does that mean for you? It means absolutely no vector database and no embeddings to manage. Everything simply merges into one giant graph, and then a clustering algorithm called Leadin goes to work grouping related nodes into what they call communities. Each community becomes a logical neighborhood, so things like your rendering logic or your authentication layer are grouped together naturally. And remember that 3-pass 3 API cost we just talked about? Well, Graphify cleverly caches the result using a SHA-256 hash. So if you go in and change a single file later, only that specific file gets reprocessed, meaning you never ever pay for the same content twice. Okay, so you're probably eager to actually set this up on your machine, but listen up. Pay close attention to this next detail because it will save you a massive headache. First, you absolutely need Python 3.10 or newer. If you try running this on an older version, the install will straight up fail, or you're going to hit some really weird errors. So update that via brew on a Mac, the Python website if you're on Windows, or through your Linux package manager. Second, and this is vital, the terminal command is pip install Graphify. Yes, that package name ends with a double Y. There are similar unofficial packages floating around out there, so do not accidentally grab the wrong one. Once you have it installed, you need to weave it directly into Antigravity's DNA. Because Antigravity doesn't have built-in tool hooks out of the box, Graphify uses two really clever setup commands. You run Graphify install /platform antigravity, and then Graphify antigravity install. What this actually does is write two highly specific files for you. It drops a file into your rules/graphify.md, which gives deep context to every single conversation, and it writes to workflow/graphify.md, which registers a handy / command. So practically, this means every single time you spawn an agent in mission control, it automatically knows the graph exists, and it's strictly instructed to read the graph report before taking any action whatsoever. It's just always on. So let's actually build the graph. In your anti-gravity editor or in your terminal, you literally just type /graphy dot to graph your current directory. And don't worry, it perfectly respects a .graphify ignore file exactly like Git does, so you can easily skip your node modules folder, which, let's face it, has its own gravitational pull anyway. Now, let's set some realistic expectations here. For a medium-sized project with a few hundred files, this first initial run is going to take about 10 to 15 minutes. Go grab a coffee. When it's done, it outputs a neat graphy out folder. Inside, you'll find a machine-readable JSON, a high-level Markdown report, and a really cool interactive HTML map. If you actually go ahead and open that graph.html file in your browser, you are immediately greeted with this beautiful, sprawling star map of your project. It's all these colored dots intricately connected by lines. Every function, every class, every doc is a dot. But what you are really looking for in this visualization are the God nodes. These are the massive central dots on the map. Think about it. If 40 different files in your codebase all touch one specific authentication module, that module appears as a giant God node. It instantly visually reveals the true beating heart of your codebase to both you and your agent. Now let's talk about the real impact. 71.5 times. That is the jaw-dropping number Graphify quotes for token reduction per query. Now, context absolutely matters here. This specific benchmark is drawn from a pretty extreme case. They compared a 52-file mixed corpus loaded entirely into the context window versus just reading the graph and targeting specific sections. But look, even though your real-world numbers on standard daily tasks might be a bit smaller than that, the overall savings on large projects are absolutely massive. Plus, with the context narrowed down, the answers your agent actually provides are significantly more accurate. Let's ground that massive 71x statistic with a pragmatic reality check, just so you know exactly when to use this. If your project is just some tiny script under 10 files, honestly, don't bother. Your basic anti-gravity agent can handle that completely blind without breaking a sweat. For small projects, you might see a 5 to 15% token reduction, which is still great for improving the agent's overall answer accuracy. But where Graphify truly earns its keep, where it's an absolute game changer, is on large, mixed content projects. We're talking about a real, heavy code base mixing raw code, a dense docs folder, maybe some transcribed meeting notes. That is exactly where the token savings and the workflow improvements just compound exponentially. Of course, there's a catch. An outdated map is a dangerous map. Keeping this knowledge graph fresh is critical to the whole system working. You basically have two options here. You could manually run Graphify update whenever you happen to think about it, but let's be honest with ourselves, you are definitely going to forget. The much better option is just running Graphify hook install. This wires up Git hooks so that the knowledge graph automatically rebuilds, silently in the background on every single commit and every branch switch. Do this and your agent will literally never act on outdated information again. And before we wrap this up, there is a fantastic little bonus feature. You don't even need an AI agent to get value out of the graph. Graphify actually comes bundled with some incredibly powerful CLI tools right for your terminal. You can just use Graphify Query to ask questions and get file references instantly. You can run Graphify Path to find the absolute shortest connection between two totally different concepts in your code. Or you can use Graphify Explain to get a quick, plain language summary of any specific node when you just need an answer right now. It's incredibly versatile. So bringing it all together, the crucial takeaway here is simply this. Your AI's context window is incredibly valuable real estate. Every single token spent just reading raw files from scratch is a token entirely wasted. With tools like Graphify available to turn your chaotic, messy project folders into beautifully structured, easily digestible knowledge graphs, you really have to ask yourself a question. Are you going to keep paying your AI to fly blind every single day? I highly recommend you give it a try on your largest repository today and just see the difference for yourself. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.